Hello and welcome to StroongeCast episode 85.
Part 1, The Younger Years.
Ooh, a multi-part series. We've never done that before.
No, we haven't.
Be interesting. But before we get to said younger years, how has your current week been?
I feel like this has been one of the longest weeks.
It has.
Don't you think?
Very much.
We've had a really, really sick Jake. He's been unwell with a really horrible virus, which has just been awful because he never gets sick.
He does not.
And this really has taken it out of him. He's been at home for a few days, had to take him to the doctors. It's been a whole worrying thing.
Yeah.
And obviously he's got his GCSEs in a couple of weeks. They begin. So it's just like the worst possible time for him to be this unwell. But he's been really brave and
He has.
stoic about the whole thing because that's just Jake. He doesn't complain.
He really doesn't.
No, he doesn't, bless him. Even when he's really unwell. So he is at least back at school. It's just taking time to get back to normal. And then I've just had a really busy week with other things. Just doing.
Well, you've been doing
cat
community
stuff
service in a
and-
way.
Yeah, I have.
Not for any penitentiary reasons.
No. I've sort of become friends with this older lady who has a cat that she needs sort of help with. She's got back problems and walks with a stick and stuff, and she needed help going to the vets and putting him in his basket and all of that kind of stuff. So I spent a good couple of hours with her yesterday. But she's so nice and the cat's really sweet, and yeah. So it's just been busy. It's just been really busy. But you know, fine. All fine.
Which is
but
good.
You've got more exciting things to tell.
I decided to move out of my house of 13 years, and my house is virtual, by the way. It's my desktop computer that I was always saying was older than dirt. It was a workhorse, and there was technically nothing wrong with it, but I had been wanting to build a new machine for ages because occasionally it would blue screen and do bad things. And, I had given Jake the money to build it and to buy parts for it 3-4 weeks ago, and he's been busy with mock exams and everything else, so it took him a while to get to it. But the other day, he came downstairs with it, as he does, and says, right, I've done it. And he put it on the floor. And I was doing something the next day. I was working with a student and a singer or something, so I couldn't mess with it, and I had to be very disciplined and not move over. Because, computer downtime is a really long-winded thing. It takes ages. And I did not want to be caught flat-footed. Plus, I wanted to get all my apps back up and running, and that's about a day's work. So I set myself the task of finishing what I needed to finish, and then on Tuesday afternoon, after everything was done, I said, right, come sit on the floor with me for moral support. And we...
I felt like I didn't do anything. I was just sitting there like a little cheerleader, like, yeah, go on, you can do it. That was it.
So I shut down the old machine for the final time, and I took out the graphics card, the hard drives and everything in there, and moved them to the new system. And then we had the weirdest, craziest time actually getting Windows to see anything, because Windows is Windows, and we normally plug into the TV. I don't have a monitor because I don't need one. So we use our TV as the display, and we knew the machine was on because lights were happening and it was doing what it was supposed to be doing. And also I get a notification when any new device joins the network. And it told me, blah, desktop something has joined the network. So I knew Windows was on, even if there was no sound. Couldn't get any display. So in the end, I plugged it into my capture card, which I bought recently for playing Switch games on the Mac. And we used my Mac as a display. And it was really, really, really tiny, wasn't it? You could barely see the thing. Which was crazy.
It wasn't easiest, but we managed.
We did.
Did it?
And I had you go through the Windows installation with me, which is a nightmare these days. Honestly, Windows used to be so much easier to install. I now hate the installation process. I was upgrading from Windows 10 to 11 as well, and not by choice. But this hardware, probably some of it requires it, so it was one of those things. And it took me a long time to get sound as well. Because Narrator was
the biggest
coming
problem,
out.
wasn't it?
It was the
Getting
biggest problem.
sound, yeah.
When Narrator was coming out of somewhere, but it wasn't the somewhere that I could hear. And everything I plugged into did not produce noise. So it was a bit of a mess. In the end, I found a really, really, really geeky workaround, and I won't even go into it, but suffice to say, I got my phone to act as an audio interface. And that's how I installed Windows.
So basically, all your smaller technologies helped you
Yep,
figure out your bigger technologies.
that's it. So Jake did this amazing build for me, and despite being sick, he got it done. And then he helped me put some parts together because I couldn't. And I'm upset with him in a funny way because he has not at all bragged about the work he's done. I need to, at some point, I'll have to take a picture, maybe next week, as artwork, I'll show you. The inside of my case is pristine. Every wire, every cable in its exact place. It's not some kind of botched job build. This could have been done by a professional PC builder. It is gorgeous, right? Everything is tucked away absolutely neatly. Nothing to complain about.
That's what he does. He
I
does
know.
such a good job. And he doesn't brag. He never brags about anything.
He's not that kind of guy.
No.
So I was going to say to him, look, I'm upset with you because you didn't tell me how good it looked inside here. It looks great. I opened it today because I heard some strange sound and it just turned out the CPU fan was slightly knocking. Fixed it. No problem. But when I looked around, all the cabling was so good.
Yeah.
And that's been my week. It
does-
took me 24 hours to get back up and running. It used to be 6. Back in the day, I timed it. I used to install everything, get everything up and running, Windows configured the way it used to be. 6 hours. But now, with all the bloat and crap that Microsoft adds, 24 hours.
But you did it.
I did it.
And you actually had a good night's sleep last night because you finished it.
Yeah, the previous two nights, I had 4 hours sleep on one of those nights.
Yeah, it wasn't
And
good.
my watch complained bitterly about it.
Yeah.
But I'm now recording this. Well, I'll be editing this podcast on the new setup, and I've managed to muscle my memory back into the way it should be. Crazy though, just crazy. And that's been like the hardest part of my week, to be fair. It's made it. Parts of it did fly, because when I was having fun.
Not for me.
No, not for you.
Really long week.
Long week. But I was able to play a game that I bought on Steam when it was on sale before, which wouldn't run on the old system. My old system was from 2012. This is a much newer system with much newer components. So a lot of things actually will run fine now. And it's specifically a gaming CPU. So it's really nice. And I was able to play Forza Motorsport. I haven't
Do you remember when
into
Jake was
that
younger?
yet.
He was obsessed with Forza Horizon.
He was obsessed with Horizon. It's a great game. I used to listen to him play it. I'll sit on the sofa sometimes, and he was just great. The GPS in that thing felt so real. It was really cool.
It's a very Jake-heavy episode.
It will be. Yeah. Or could have been. But yes, that's my week. Gosh. A busy one. Next week, hopefully, it'll be quieter. Oh, dear.
Right.
Go on then.
Quiz question
Quiz question.
from last week. What word can be placed before bottle, bell, and bird?
Blue.
Blue. Well done. And we.
You know what else you could place there? Baby.
Baby, bottle, baby bell, baby bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
could.
Baby bell.
Exactly. That's why I thought of it. But,
I
you know,
just
it
ate
works
a
for
baby
bottle
bell
and
as well.
bird as well. It does.
It does, yeah. That's good. We
But
will
not
go
blue
into
baby.
the
You
comments.
don't want a blue baby. That's not your friend.
No, you don't want a blue baby.
However, baby blue works.
But yeah, baby blue. Yeah, we will go into the comments in a second, but Marie did get that correct.
That she did.
So well done. And this week's quiz question is going to be, when I find it again, here we go. Composed of approximately 60% fat, which of the following is the fattiest organ in the human body?
Yeah.
Is it the brain, the heart, or the liver?
Okay. Multiple choice.
Multiple choice. We like multiple choice.
Yeah.
It's a bit easier.
We'll be interested to see, because I'm not even sure I know the answer. All right.
There you go.
So go on then. Virtual mailbag.
Yes.
You've got a fair few. Somebody took advantage of being a YouTube member to leave comments before the episode was out, which I love to see.
Yeah.
Made me very happy.
I didn't see until afterwards.
No.
So, Marie, I don't know how to figure out which comment comes first because it's like they're kind of dotted in.
Yeah, I don't know. The ordering got strange.
Yeah, it's really weird. But the one that's, I suppose, says it's the longest.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I don't know because they just say 7 days or 6 days. Anyway. So she said, well, it looks like I'm going to be coming to your place on Friday to have butter chicken because it's my absolute favourite food ever. I wish I knew how to make it myself. It can't possibly be that hard, although knowing me, I would cheat and use a sauce out of a jar. It is really easy. There are so many easy recipes and it's really not that many ingredients. So honestly, I would say give it a go because it's super, super easy.
I had forgotten about last week because so much happened this week. So let's go back a little bit. On that day that she made butter chicken, she also went to the shop and she asked if I wanted this box of loaded fries from the shop that we both like.
I know, she was really feeding you that day, wasn't she?
Proper feeding. So I had that and then I wasn't hungry for dinner. I don't remember what I had for dinner, but it wasn't butter chicken.
No, you did. You had a really small portion.
Oh, that's right.
And then you had your bigger portion the next day.
That's what I did. So I got to enjoy Alice's butter chicken not once, but twice.
Yeah.
And it was epic. And no, you can't have any. Please continue.
So we also have... also, in regards to the quiz question, the answer is blue. Well done. By the way, as an aside, whoever wrote the song There'll Be Bluebirds Over the White Cliffs of Dover clearly wasn't from England because they didn't know that there are no bluebirds in Dover.
Okay.
So there you go.
Did I know that? I don't know if I knew that.
I didn't know that there weren't bluebirds.
Funny.
So she also says with Waymo, they have cameras and microphones inside the car. And yes, there is an app. If you need to contact support for any reason, there's a button, I believe, you can push. They even mention it when you get in the car. Also, when the car door opens, it greets you. We don't have Waymo where I am, but they do have it in Washington, D.C. Granted, that's about an hour away from me, but I guess they don't travel out super far. It makes sense. Yeah. Waymo tends to take a lot of back roads, so it's not running into heavy traffic. I think they're going to do that for... I think they're going to do that for right now, just to see how well it works out. It seems to work out well for a lot of people, though. I haven't really heard many negative things about it.
No,
and then
I haven't.
She also said, "Oh, there will be definitely court cases when it comes to things like this, and not just because of the insurance. Can you imagine trying to be pulled over by police in a self-driving car? This is one thing that always worries me. So I've been very cautious about wanting one."
That's an interesting one. I don't think we thought about that, or at least I didn't. How would a policeman tell you to pull over? Because the car's just going to carry on, right? You'd have to reach out and do a thing.
Well, maybe there would be some kind of scanning system or something where, I don't know. I was just thinking if there's so many cameras and it's, if there was a police car within a certain distance, maybe.
Yeah, could be.
Because there's also that factor when you're driving around or whatever up and down the roads and an ambulance, a fire truck, any emergency vehicle approaches, you pull over, but sometimes you have to sort of pull over into weird spots or move out of the way or whatever. Does it have the ability to recognize when it needs to move out of the way for an emergency vehicle?
They would have to have trained it on those things because it's too important.
Yeah. But there's all those kind of things, but
yeah, you definitely hope so.
But that does make sense that there's buttons and the app and all of that stuff inside as well. So
yeah,
that is good. We then have from Tara.
Yeah, she has been in these.
Tara has 2 comments, and I'm not sure which one is first, but she said there is a support button in the car where you can call somebody or stop, or you can change your route in mid-drive. So that's good. Also, if there's some sort of emergency, you can just open the door and the car will pull over and stop, to my knowledge.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, they all make sense. It's just, if you're not sure, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have no problem. She also says, I would have no problem using any of these cars. They've driven millions of miles with very few incidents and accidents. The only reason we know about those very few incidents is because that is what the media concentrate on. The statistics of human driving, getting into an accident, is so much more than the amount of the driverless cars. Which, it is that thing of you know, when people are worried about flying and everyone
You
says,
only
oh,
hear
it's
the
the
bad stuff.
safest, you only hear about it because it's so rare. You only hear when something terrible happens.
Well, that's it. That's it.
We also have a comment from KD6CAE.
Yes. Guy called Monty. He commented one time on another episode earlier on, I think.
Okay.
Long time.
He said, this was a fascinating episode. One of the big questions I have is, what if something goes horribly wrong and the car starts speeding or something? It ends up getting pulled over. How would the car handle that? Or how would you, the unsuspecting passenger / owner of the car, deal with that?
Yeah.
For now, anyway, I don't think Waymo travels on major highways or freeways. But if that should ever change, that will make things interesting.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
I do want to try it over here at some point, but with you or something. We'll see.
Yeah. I don't know how I would handle that if it was... Well, I suppose it's not your fault. You're not the one in control.
Nope. This is the thing. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the questions we touched on is like, who's in control?
Yeah,
Who
exactly.
takes responsibility?
And there was one more from Marie, which I didn't see, so it was at the bottom, that said the ADA is known as the Americans with Disability Act.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she said, okay, I'll shut up now. No, Marie, don't shut up. We like all the comments.
Yes.
It's really great for us. And we just have to mention another comment that we had from John Pigstrong that says, I like apples.
Just that.
I like apples.
You do too.
I very much like apples. He's also the person that left the interesting comment about a dream that he had on a previous episode.
Yes.
So, yeah. But look, we appreciate all comments.
It's like a friendly
Thank you very
troll.
much.
Most odd.
Yes. There you go.
That's the
That's
stuff.
that for today.
Cool. Go on then.
Okay.
What is it? What is it about? What is happening?
So I thought it would be interesting to talk about your life, I guess, and your disability. So I thought if we started off with your younger years, and I just sort of had, I guess, some basic questions. Maybe if we start from like your earliest memories of being blind, like, did you have to be told? Was it a thing of like your mum or your dad or someone saying to you, yeah, your eyes don't work, you can't see? Or was it just a kind of given? And, you know, what sort of memories do you have of that, that time, I guess?
I am not sure if I remember being specifically told. I probably thought it was just normal, but I knew that other people's eyes did stuff. Because I went to nursery, the same nursery that our kids actually went to, Clare Gardens, which I thought was really nice.
No, they didn't end up going there in the end.
No, wait.
They were going to. We went and looked at it.
Yeah, that's right.
But they didn't, because then we moved.
That's why they didn't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have.
Mm-hmm.
That did not work out. It would have been. You know what it is? We were born in the same hospital. That's what it is.
Yeah.
St. Mary's. They didn't go to my nursery.
No.
But I had a lot of fun at nursery. I met some cool people from what I remember. I mean, it was years ago. What do I know?
So thinking about nursery then, do you remember any of the things that perhaps they might have done to help accommodate you or to help teach you from that really early age? Or even at home, like with your mum and dad, was there anything that you think, now that we've had our own kids, so you know how we've done things,
Yeah.
is there anything that you think, oh yeah, they did this differently, or that was taught to me, or...
Actually, no, because nursery was more about, I think, having fun. I remember like bits and pieces of the time there, like nap time. And I remember that I was not one to nap. Didn't like it. Didn't like missing out.
Your mum did say you didn't sleep at night either, so...
That she did. See, this would have been great to have her on here. Would have been really cool to have like a mum interview.
Yeah.
But we'll have to, have to remember things that she said to you that I don't. But I do remember not napping, and somebody would sit with me and we'd have to play very quietly because everyone else was napping and I wasn't. I don't know if it was just closing my eyes made no difference. So it wasn't really dark or light to me, just didn't feature. So I didn't
I
like
just
napping in
think
the day.
generally you're not somebody who needs that much sleep. So that probably wouldn't have been any different when you were little.
Apparently not. Still the same.
Yeah.
It wasn't nursery that did things or suggested things to do at home, or if it was, I don't know. But I can remember things that my first school after nursery did.
Yeah.
And I suppose, actually, we should talk about Pam.
Mm-hmm.
Because Pam, I think, and if she listens, in fact, I'll get her to listen to this episode. She may be able to comment and clarify a few things. I'm hoping so. I believe Pam came and looked after me from the time I was at nursery, so a long time ago, and then moved to John Ed with me as a sort of helper, carer as well,
Yeah.
if memory serves. And Pam is an American lady that was lovely, is lovely, and I've known her basically all my life. I can't remember a time before Pam. And her husband, David. And they used to take me all sorts of fun places. I don't know quite how or why I got picked, but I'm happy because we did all sorts of fun things. I remember we went to a house with a big grandfather clock in it once. Kew Gardens, I'm pretty sure, just all over the place, did fun things. And she sent over some pictures recently, if you recall. Young me, being young me.
Yeah.
Which was really, I'm glad that she had those stored because I had no other copies of those. That was nice. And so after nursery, I went to another school called John Ed, which is now closed. And it closed the year that I went to Worcester in 92. So I was one of the last students at that place. I think it was 20 kids by the time I left it. 20. That's not sustainable for a school. So Clare Gardens was not a VI specific nursery. It wasn't blind specific.
Well, was there did they just kind of, because in nursery, you obviously have one person sort of looking after a whole group of the kids. Did you have somebody with you that you remember going around with you, or were you just kind of like, here you go, off you go?
I feel like I did, but I can't remember. And it's a real shame not to have those memories.
I mean, it's a really long time ago, so it's fair enough.
Yeah, I know, just but it would be really nice to know.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a remembrance. I remember knowing my way around the classroom, though. And I remember sitting at tiny desks. And I remember playing with Lego and other things. And I'm pretty sure all that stuff happened. But
yeah,
I can't remember a single person at that nursery.
That's fair enough. So then when you were sort of around that age at home, what, did you have a cane at that time? Or
I did not. I didn't
you...
get a cane until I went to John Ed with that was a blind specific school.
Yeah.
And I remember having mobility training and all kind of things. And actually, this is interesting because in a recent episode of 404 Sight Not Found, Liam and Alyssa's podcast, they talked about, and this will come and make sense in a minute, they talked about Braille watches and the fact that somebody that they went to get their rings from in the jewelry shop was really interested in watches. And so Alyssa had brought in a Braille watch that she had, and it reminded me to try and hunt for my two because I have one that was made in USSR. That's how old that is. And I got that from a mobility instructor at my first school for knowing a route particularly well. Aww. She took me around Hamleys to get a gift.
That's really cute.
And I remember that. That was Miss Jones. She was really cool.
That is really nice.
It's funny, the things that come to your mind randomly. But I do remember much more about my day school than my nursery school. So I had two teachers, Mrs. Davy, who we met once, just after Mum died, she came here, and Miss Heathy. And they were the two teachers in the early part of my school years. And I had a bunch of friends there. One particular friend who I can't seem to get hold of anymore because his phone just rings and rings, James Davison. We used to ride the bus together. So he would get dropped off before me. And that was real fun. So those days we had a specific school bus, it wasn't like a public transport thing.
Yeah.
So the bus would turn up outside your house. It would beep loudly.
Yeah, they still have them. I still see them all the time. They pick up children.
Well, we did that for me.
Yeah.
And so you get to know people on your bus really well.
Yeah.
There was a girl, I think in the year above me, called Rebecca, who I'm still on the hunt for. I can't find her on Facebook or anything. And her mum, Doreen. Now, in my later school years, but before Worcester, my mum was doing some kind of work in the day, so she wasn't home before I was.
Yeah.
So they made an arrangement that I would get dropped off at Rebecca's house and I would have dinner with them and my mum would pick me up from there. So I got to know their family really well as well. Her mum was Doreen and her dad was someone, I don't remember, and he was a bus driver. Nice. And then later on, much later on, by the time I had, I don't know if I'd gone to Worcester at that point. No, I couldn't have been. But they had another boy called Jason, so Rebecca's younger brother. I don't remember him too much, but Rebecca and I used to swap tapes, right? This is the 80s. So on the bus, we'd swap tapes and record things for each other from the radio and things like that.
Nice.
I know. Really cool.
That's really cool.
A lot of crazy stuff. And there was another point on that bus, because I think school life is divided into things you do throughout the day. Notice I haven't mentioned any lessons. I can't remember them.
No.
But I remember my journeys to and from. And there was a guy that came from Thailand later on called Fa, just F-A. So obviously trying to find him is a pain in the ass. Just cannot do it. The name is too common. And also I can't spell his last name. I can remember it in my head. I can't spell it. So trying to find him as well. I've been trying to hook up with a lot of my old school friends. I'm much more searchable than they are, clearly. But they haven't searched for me, so maybe it's just a one-way thing. But yeah, we were good friends. He was partially sighted. Rebecca and I were both blind. My friend James also was partial. So John Ed had a lot more partial than blind from what I recall. And we all split up and went to different schools. I don't think anybody but me went to Worcester. A lot of them went to Wood Lane, which was close by. And some of them went to Dalton House, which is another VI specific school. And some of them went to another place called Linden Lodge, which is where James Bowden went. You know James Bowden?
Of course.
Of course. So yeah, very few people went to Worcester. So it was quite interesting. I was very alone and it was boarding school and it was hard. Now, we did a whole thing called School Memories. I want to say it was like episode 11 or something. It was really, really, really long time ago. And it's long too. But yeah, we'll talk more about that next week. So yeah, early memories are interesting. They're a bit hazy now, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way the brain works. But it'd probably take like a hypnotist or somebody really cool or somebody from my past to refresh them. But as with memories, you never really forget them. You just forget where they live. So I know that they're there and buried. And if I could find someone from my past to remind me of certain things, it would come back to life. I remember having a lot of fun.
I'm curious about how you were taught things.
Yeah.
That's what I think really I always think about.
That, yeah. You know what? You reminded me of something just then, because I can't remember if it was last week or the week before. Someone said that these kids these days can't tell analog time. And I learned to do that. So I had a desk in my room when I was a kid. I don't know where it came from, with a flip-up lid, right? You'd store stuff inside and you work on top. Mm-hmm. On the flip-up lid, my mum had blue-tacked a Braille plastic clock, which was, it didn't work, right? It had hands and you could move them to set times, but it was not wound up or anything. And she got this from school because I think they said that I was having trouble with analog time at the time. And this was things that you needed to know. So Mrs. Davey, I remember standing there as I had the conversation, said, take home this clock and put it on the desk. She knew I had that desk. I don't know if they gave it to me from school or something. And so my mum did that. And then she would set the hands to particular times and I would have to tell her what they were. So that's how I learned analog time. I do remember that. And because it was a tactile clock, it had Braille markings around all the hours. Yeah. And I can sort of remember the feel of it as well, actually. It was like a vinyl record with a bit at the top to hang it from.
Yeah.
So that sticks out. I had a Perkins Brailler, so I could do Braille writing at home. Again, no idea where that came from. It was in a case, a very hard, like plastic case, and Braille paper, and that lived in the case lid. Mm-hmm. And I think I took one of those to Worcester when I moved to Worcester, so that was around for a long time. But you know, apart from that, being the 80s, just there wasn't that much blind tech, if that makes sense. No. I don't think
do you
I
think
had
everything
much
was
bespoke
Braille
stuff.
then?
Yeah, it was Braille homework and Braille worksheets and of course stuff like that.
Yeah.
In school I had a Braille printer which is not really what it sounds like. It didn't print Braille, but what you do is you put a Brailler, like a Braille machine, on top of a special box, right?
Yeah.
And when you press down the levers of the Braille machine, it would push down on levers that were also corresponding on this box. And that converted Braille into print. And every time you pressed enter on the Braille machine and then pulled the carriage back, it would print out whatever line you just typed. So people that couldn't read Braille in the school, of which there were just a few, most people could.
Yeah.
I could have my work printed out on a dot matrix printer. Remember those tractor feed printers? Yeah. Lots and lots of reams of paper. So, of course, I had to sit in a very specific spot each time to use that. So when we were taught maths or whatever, that's where I would sit at the Braille printer. I do remember that. They were funny in little boxes.
And like getting around the school from when you're really little,
Yeah.
like how does that work? Do you just have like all the kids kind of shown the routes around and then
I think so.
off they go?
I just remember knowing my way around.
Yeah.
It's possible that James, my friend who was with me like almost all the time, guided me some places if there was stuff in the way. But once I knew the route, I used to just tear up and down the stairs. I know it used to scare teachers. That school was quite small though. I think it was like 3 floors, if that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the biggest room was the dining room. So navigating that was sometimes a bit of a interesting one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember it not being too big. I'd love to go back there. I'm sure all the buildings would have changed. It might even be standing anymore. I don't know. But I'd love to go back and see if that building invokes like a, oh my God, memories. Because I'm certain it would if it was still standing.
Yeah.
It would be really cool.
So what other things do you think you had at home that helped you just in general? Like, was there anything?
Not until later years. In my day school,
Yeah.
because it was like day school and boarding school.
Yeah.
That's kind of how life is defined in sections, you know, like pretty much anything.
Yeah.
In day school, no. The clock,
It's the only thing.
the
you can
Brailler.
remember.
I didn't have a talking book player yet. I didn't get that until I went to Worcester, which is funny because I wasn't there to use it. But RNIB sent me a talking book player years later.
But like, there must have been basic things that your mum was teaching you on a, you know, just stuff that you just teach little kids. Like when you were out in the street and stuff, did she teach you certain things that perhaps would have been different to what
How
we
you
would
were
have taught
taught.
ours, or how, or
No,
I don't know. I just feel like it must have been different. Like there's all these things that you just know, but
Yeah.
how do you
How do you know
get
them?
to that point that you knew them, I guess.
Again, this would have been great to hear.
I know. Yeah.
Maybe my dad has some ideas, but
Yeah.
because I wasn't going anywhere, like I was either at home or school, right? I wasn't going anywhere. It's particularly because boarding school was age 9, right? So before that, I wasn't out anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult remembering.
But you used to tell me about how you used to play out on the
I did.
street with all the other kids, and you would just be running around, and you'd all be in and out of each other's houses and stuff. Like
That wasn't on my street. That was my friend. So I was up in Kensal Rise.
yeah.
And that street wasn't pedestrianised, right? Didn't even have sleeping policemen. Just people never used to drive down it quickly. It
You
just
see,
wasn't a thing.
That just like baffles me, I think. How were you so competent to just be out going around?
I think
like
because
that?
my mum never limited what I could do. If I wanted to try it, she would allow me to try it. She never said, oh, no, you mustn't, you can't, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
That wasn't who she was, ever,
Yeah.
right? And I think I told you about, I don't know if I mentioned it, I must have mentioned it on the podcast at some point, but when we went on holiday to Barbados for 4 weeks, I probably spent
Yes.
3.5, or well, 2.5 of those 4 weeks away from her company
Yeah.
in a foreign country with family that I'd never met, pre-mobile phone, right? She was off doing her thing. I was off doing my thing. And we didn't see each other. We sometimes would bump into each other at random places. It was so funny. Someone would be like, you know, your mum's here. And there she would be.
Wow.
So, yeah, I just hung with the fam. I did what I did. And she just let me do these things. And that was like, you know, age 8, 9.
Yeah.
very free-spirited. It was interesting.
And then do you remember when it first came up about you going to boarding school?
The first conversation, no, I remember chats about it and that I would be going and that it would be very, very different and that I would have to get used to a lot of changes.
Do you remember how you felt or
I think
questions
I
you might
would,
have
yeah,
asked?
I remember I was nervous and I remember being very homesick when I went for the first
But like
little
before
while.
you went?
Oh,
'Cause
yeah,
some
before
kids
I
would
went,
be
it's
like,
crazy.
no, I'm not going.
I think I was a mixture of nervous and excited
Right.
because there was a week, right? They don't do it for everybody. I'm not sure why they did it for me, but they sent me off to Worcester for a week. I think most assessments like are 1 or 2 days,
Yeah.
maybe just like a distance. Maybe the London kids got it because it's like a train there and a train back.
Yeah.
So I think my dad drove me for this. You know, I don't remember how I got to the assessment. I remember how I got there the day that I went there permanently or whatever. But the assessment, not sure. I'm thinking my dad drove me up because my dad was the one who drove. My mum didn't.
Yeah.
And then I was there for an entire week and I got to learn like the lay of the land. And you get guided around for the first while because the campus is huge. I took you there
Yeah.
and it's big, right? Lots of little corridors and twisty-turny bits and
Yeah, you would definitely need help to begin with.
paths. Yeah, so for the first little while, I remember that. And the thing is, it started to come back to me when I went there actually permanently. I remembered some of it, like the way around the boarding house, for example. That was easy. It was the paths going to and from that building that took me a little while to get used to. But after a while, you get used to that. It's just, right, easy do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so of course, both of these being blind schools or blind related schools, they were able to do things, say, that nursery couldn't because they just didn't have the capability or tech. So everything was done in Braille, worksheets, everything. Computers spoke then, early days, that kind of thing. But yeah, Worcester's a whole other episode.
No, that will be the next one. But it was just that kind of the initial thoughts of this is what's going to happen,
Yeah,
I guess.
I think because the assessment set me up for, oh wow, this is cool. I can do a lot of things here.
Yeah, you thought it was all exciting.
It was exciting but apprehensive. We should
Yeah.
call it apprehensive excitement. There we go. It's a good term for the day. And I think I wanted to go, but I also didn't want to leave home. It's really tough
Yeah,
because, you know, you're leaving home at 9, not 19. It's
No.
a very different thing.
that's it. You're tiny.
And I know that you would have really, really struggled with that.
What, if I
As a
was the one
parent.
going or
No,
if
no,
I
as,
was
a,
sending?
as a parent.
Oh, awful.
We've talked about this.
We did talk about it. And I remember saying to you, I couldn't do it. And you kept saying, yeah, but if it was in their best interest, you would. And I was like, no, I just can't. I just don't think I could do that.
But you do anything for your kids. I know you. It would hurt for so long and you'd be so guilty. But
Yeah, I guess it would depend if they were going and being happy and enjoying it. But if there was ever a time when they said,
yeah,
I don't want to
absolutely.
go or whatever, I'm like, okay.
No, I get that. I
that's,
absolutely get that.
you know, that's the hard part.
And
And
I won't
I've
lie.
always said that I admired your mum so much for being able to do that.
And to
Because
think,
she
she sent me away at a young age. Sent me
Because
away
she
like prison.
knew, yeah, she sent you away. Because she knew that it was, like you said, in your best interest.
When I was 9, right, she would have been like 25. So to send a kid away at 25 must have been really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. And for such a long time, it wasn't just like a few days. This is weeks at a time.
No, it was, you have to be very, very strong
Yeah,
to be able to do that.
I'll mention it again next week. But the first weekend after I got there, she came up with my nan and bought me lots of snacks.
Oh,
So it was great to see her.
yeah, I bet.
Hard to leave though. Oh man.
Well, that's it, because you're not even like coming back,
I wasn't going back with her, no.
you know.
They drove up and drove down
Yeah.
in one day. Oof.
And you didn't go back on the weekends, did you?
No.
No. So that, you know, it's weeks at a time. It's not even like
Yeah.
a lot of boarding schools nowadays, the kids tend to, unless it's, you know, they're a bit older and it's their choice or whatever, they tend to go home
Yeah, I know.
on the weekend. So
it's changed
you
now.
kind of got that But obviously, because of the distance, that just would have been really hard.
I should talk to Mrs. Ward. I know she's leaving Worcester soon, but she'd be able to tell us if they do that now or not, whether they have implemented the weekend go home kind of thing.
Yeah. I guess it's different cases.
Yeah, definitely. It's weird because obviously different times and you feel differently the older you get. So when we get to next week and a bit further, when I went to college after Worcester, it was the same thing in a different place.
Yeah.
It even was the exact same train line. And I have mentioned before that the amount of times I nearly got off at the wrong stop because I was conditioned to do that instead of going on 45 minutes down the track to Hereford. Like, really silly. I always stopped myself. I never actually did it unless I was going to visit somebody. But I it was just that, okay. Bit longer. And then you feel like you've missed your stop.
Yes.
But by then it was routine. And it seems weird to think to my younger years when it was all so nerve-wracking and so scary to just blasé. Oh, cool.
Because
New
you were
place.
tiny.
I was. And I went to Hereford with James from Worcester, right? So I had people I knew or a person I knew. There are a few of us that went, but James and I were the closest friends. Everyone else was like periphery. Not that they were boring or bad people.
No, but it's different. You have closer friends than others.
And that helped ease the difference, I think, because I knew him for so long.
Yeah.
At that point, I'd known him for 8 years. Now it's more than 30. Time, it doth fly.
Yeah.
But all my life, I've known a James. And even my granddad was also a James.
There are a lot of James in your life.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
So younger years, it seems so weird and hazy to remember, because in my head, I know all about them, but to talk about them, I clearly don't. I remember we went to a park once, and there was like a pass through a big tunnel. This is when I was at John Edward, the younger James, not that same James. This is the problem. And you could shout, and it would reverberate all around. And, little kids doing that for ages. Good fun.
Yeah.
And I remember the foil milk bottles with the foil lids.
Yes.
I do remember that. Glass.
Yeah.
Tiny things. You have like a straw and the tiny bottle, and you have like 3 sips and it's done. That was your daily milk intake.
Oh, I didn't have glass bottles. We had cartons.
Yeah, we had glass. I don't know how we had glass. And blind people.
I was going to say, for blind children as well, glass is perhaps
It was a whole
the
thing.
safest.
And I remember, I don't know why, we were doing vegetables one day, and that's where I learned about lady's finger being vegetables. What is that? Someone handed me this and said, lady's finger. That's freaked out.
That's so funny.
That just came to me.
That is funny. Well, yeah, there you go. So you were taught about, things like that. Like that was something practical that you would have been
Yeah,
like cooking and stuff.
Oh, yeah, we were definitely taught cooking and whatever else. That continued at Worcester, of course. Home ec, it was in day school, home economics.
Yeah.
And I remember lots of my teachers' names around that time. And I remember, for example, going to PE, and I remember I had to wear shell suit.
Oh my gosh.
Don't
That's
even
so
judge.
80s.
Right? On Wednesdays, we'd go to a place called Barn Elms. I don't know where it is, but we used to take a bus to Barn Elms, and we'd go rowing in a shell suit. That was my Wednesday mornings, I want to say. Maybe afternoons.
Wow.
Good fun.
Yeah.
One time, and I told you about this, I don't know if I mentioned it on here, but one week we went to a place called Shepherd's Hill House with a whole bunch of schoolmates, and it was sort of like a week full of exercises on a farm and stuff like that. It was educational, but it didn't feel like learning.
Yeah.
And we all shared a dorm, and we'd never done that before because it wasn't boarding school. So that was really cool. We stayed up late talking.
Well, that's like the residential trips. I think all schools do.
It was so
stuff
fun.
Like that. Yeah.
And there were lots of doors marked private that we walked through sometimes. There were some shortcuts. I remember that. There was a big staircase, and there was a door to the side of the staircase that took you down quicker to get to a particular different part of the house. I don't know. It was weird. But again, I learnt my way around that with no cane, right? I remember that. I didn't have a cane for ages. I don't know when I got an actual cane that was my own, but But I was navigating this place, just handout, for the week that I was there, and no one thought anything of it.
Because you just did.
Yeah,
That's the
me
thing.
and everybody else,
Yeah.
apart from all the partials. So that was interesting. I remember getting left at school once. My dad was supposed to pick me up, and he forgot or couldn't make it or was stuck in traffic, I don't know. But it got to like 5:30, and then they called my mum, and she rushed in a car. She wasn't driving. I think Moses drove her to get me because my dad didn't.
Oh,
I was
dear.
just sat there with the school secretary, and she was working. So like, she's here but not here, you know?
Yeah.
Poor woman. Babysitting me. It was not her job. She didn't deal with kids. She dealt with admin. But I was good. I didn't do anything crazy. I just sat and listened to what I remember from that day is that she was using a daisy wheel typewriter. Of all the things.
So you just had to sit there listening to her typing?
Yeah, except she wasn't typing. They had rigged up this daisy wheel printer typewriter thing to whatever system. So she was printing out school documents. And instead of a normal printer, it was like a daisy wheel typewriter. I know that people repurpose these things. And so that's what that was. And I was like, how are you typing so fast, miss? She's like, I'm not really. This is what happens. And she explained it. I thought it was so cool. So that's what it's. Why do I remember that day? I don't know. Probably because I was there for so long.
Because you have like really random, strange memories.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I'm trying to think of anything else that stands out. Yeah, actually, there was some maths game. There was 1 or 2 talking computers because we did learn typing. That's one thing. I learned to touch type at John Ed.
Yeah.
So we had computers that talked. And there was a maths game that didn't talk. But the questions didn't change each time. It wasn't random. So you learnt the answers. I remember that. It was very silly. I remember getting James, because he could see, to input them because I couldn't read them. But if I heard it, I just knew the answer. It was just memory. It wasn't learning. So after like the third or so go, we just knew them. We could get 100%. I remember that.
That's funny.
And about typing, I remember Mrs. Chard, who was my then typing teacher. Very, very posh British lady. You know, upper class.
Yeah.
She says, K is the kicking K. That's how you remember K. Mm-hmm. Kicking K, she would say. I remember that. It's funny, the things you recall. Oh yeah, music. Of course I remember music, right? We had a big open room for music, and it was near the the dining hall. And we had this American teacher called Miss Kapinski. She was lovely. And again, someone else I've tried to find, but when you can't spell the name, you have no idea. And I keep trying to find an old school report or something, or like a teacher listing that would give you like a listing of a school. Hard to find. These things are not easy, despite the internet being vast. So it's kind of weird. But anyway, I think one day, I remember saying very quietly toward the end of the period, because it was lunch straight after that, oh, it's my birthday. And I didn't say it for anything, just other than, oh yeah, it is. And she let me go out the door first so I could queue up in the hall for lunch. We had a hatch, right? And you stood at the hatch until the time they lifted it, and then you could be first to get your plate. And if you got there first, of course, it was warm. So, yeah, I don't know why.
Always the food, isn't it?
Come on. How long have you known me now? That means that the school term was still right into May. It couldn't have been much longer than that, because that's a weird time to have it, isn't it?
Yeah.
For any time, any period. But yeah, we were at school on my birthday. And she played piano and they sang to me. I remember that.
Aww.
I don't know how old I was. Another time, they got PC Melvin from the Bill to come in and talk to us.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And it was in music class, of all things. It wasn't like
that's really random.
Home economics or something. It was in music class. I don't know why he was there. I mean, it was great because I used to watch the Bill a lot with my mum. But he was leaving the Bill the next week. I think he was being killed in a fire. Or something. I know.
How jolly for children.
Jolly! But yeah, I remember that. Very random. Memories. They're funny things. They come and go like a wind. Oh dear. You have to think about yours, actually. We should do a you one day.
No, because this is about you. And, you know.
I don't mean now, but I mean, we should think about you too. It'd be so interesting to hear about like an all-girls experience.
Yeah, but it was more like the questions and the thoughts and stuff that I had. It was more about your learning and the difference, for a blind or partially sighted, but obviously for you, a blind child.
Yeah. Well, I think it was more normal than you think. Just reading in Braille instead of print, and sometimes typing answers out on computer, which we still do now.
Yeah.
We used a thing on the BBC computers called WordWise. That was the word processor. And I did that in Worcester as well as John Ed. I remember that. But primarily Worcester.
Yeah.
Never used it after that because it was obsolete by then. But yeah, I learnt very early programming on those computers too. Joyful things. Do you have any other weird questions for me that I can think about? Because you know what? When you ask questions, it jogs the...
I don't think I
Jogs the
do, because
brain.
I think most of the other stuff will come sort of in the next one.
Yeah.
Like, when you're a little bit older.
I do wonder how many blind children went to specialist schools throughout their entire school life, though. Was always at specialist school, apart from nursery, which is quite unusual in the US, I think, more than here. There, they call them Braille jails.
Oh.
Yeah, they have a bad rep over there, but our schools tend to be better thought of, I think, I would say, in most cases.
Yeah.
Like, it was never stigma to go to them here, but it was certainly more of one in the US, from what I've heard from my US friends. So I'd love to hear about that experience in the comments. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's all I've got for now. Next week is a whole other kettle of fish. Lots more to tell. I can think of a lot more already.
Good. There you go.
But I will hold on to that.
Expect a longer episode next week.
Maybe. Unless I can speak quickly. But yeah. Otherwise, do you have a Stroonge news story for me?
I do.
Great.
So this is based in California. And it's about a Californian man arrested for allegedly swapping in pasta for Lego pieces and then returning them.
That's silly.
Yeah. So
They don't even look the same. Are you blind?
no, so what he would do is he would buy the Lego sets from Target,
Mm-hmm.
and then he would swap, like open them up carefully, swap out open the bags, take out the stuff, fill it with pasta, and then seal the bags back up. Because you can buy those things now where you can seal
Resealers.
packets and stuff.
Yep.
Put them back in, seal the boxes back up so you couldn't tell, and then return them.
That's so naughty.
And
Don't
it's
do that.
thought that it's alleged that it's up to $34,000 worth of Lego looting.
He must have done that for ages.
Yeah, I think he just went around doing it to
Different store.
various different stores. Yeah.
Cheeky man.
And then obviously they then put them back on the shelves and other people come in and buy them,
Getting pasta.
get them home, and they've got packets of pasta.
That's so cruel.
Yeah.
Devious man.
Yes.
Why would you do this? I mean, are you going to build with any of that?
Well, maybe he's just really obsessed with Lego, or maybe he's reselling them. Sometimes you can sell them, a bit cheaper if you don't have the box or whatever. But yeah.
That's really, really weird. People be strange, is what I can say. But I'm not going to be eating that pasta. I prefer to get it from an actual packet of pasta that was designated. Or imagine you open a packet of pasta and you get Lego.
Oh, no.
You pour it into the pot. Wait a minute, that doesn't look right. What's going on? Oh, wow. There's some ball throwing going on here.
The dog's a bit crazy right now.
She is. But I mean, she's always crazy. But yeah,
Yes.
that's us for the week. I hope you found my little trip down school memory lane interesting. It's sort of unrelated to the school memories episode because this is younger. My other episode was more talking about Worcester. And I have other Worcester memories next time. More about the learning side of things. So yeah, this is the first of a 3-part, we think. Yeah?
Yeah, it will be.
Okay. She has spoken thus. And we even have something else the week after. I gave you a cool title, so you can start thinking about that.
Yes.
So we're planning ahead here. This is really cool. It's so hard sometimes to come up with ideas, but we actually have a plan. So if you're interested, do stick around for that plan. And if you have any comments, do leave them where you know to leave them. It'd be great to have your thoughts and feelings. And until next time, anyway.
Bye.